Thank you very much. So yeah, as he says, I'm Henry Stuart from London, England. And I'm here to talk today about the Royal Wedding Gigapixel Panorama, which I shot back in April for the BBC. Oh, first of all, I just want to say thanks so much to Carlos and everyone else here for organizing such a brilliant festival.
Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I'll start with a quick introduction to me and spherical images. Then I'll show you the image for those of you who haven't seen it, and talk you through the brief I was given and some of the technical aspects and difficulties I had in shooting the image, and talk a bit about the post-production, and then I'll take some questions if we have time at the end. Okay, so I set up spherical images back in 2006 from a completely irrelevant background and a degree in biology. It seems like a lot of people here have come from odd backgrounds to get into this, but I'm one of them. Since 2006, I've been lucky enough to work with some really excellent clients, including obviously the BBC. I'll be doing all the venues for London 2012. I've done some stuff for the Times and some really fun stuff, so I've been very lucky. But that's all been virtual tours and panoramic photography. The gigapixel stuff is relatively new to me. It was actually the case that it was one of those jobs where the BBC said to me, wouldn't it be cool to do a gigapixel of the Royal Wedding? Can you do it? And I'd never really done it before, but of course I said yes, which is what we all have to do sometimes. So I then had to quickly have a very steep learning curve. So let me just show you the picture now. Okay, so as you can see, the position I was given was looking down this long road that leads out from Buckingham Palace called the Mall. And I was on a tower in the middle of this roundabout, and I had a brilliant view right the way down the Mall. And the view looks right the way around to the right until I got to the BBC News video cameraman, so I couldn't go any further than this. And then around to the left, I had a much bigger sweep. I could see right the way around, almost to the memorial itself. So that's the view I had to play with. And then the detail captured is pretty high. As you can see, loads of characters in the crowd and people all looking towards the procession itself. And that was the real challenge of this picture, was to try and get everyone in the crowd looking towards the procession, to get such a moment on everyone's faces, because it would have been very easy to have missed the moment, and you'd have had people kind of staring at the wrong place or scratching their head or whatever else. Yeah, so that's the picture, and if you look in a lot of detail, there's lots of fun stuff you can spot. I personally love these people in this news studio up here, looking over their shoulder, checking out what's going on behind them there. They're obviously not recording at the time. Yeah, so that's the image. Okay. So the brief I was given by the BBC, first of all in January when they were just scoping out the idea of doing it, they were very, very relaxed, and they said, look, we know this is kind of an experimental thing, doing it with a crowd like this, it might not work, but that's okay, just enjoy the day. And then as the date got closer, I think there must have been more and more pressure kind of piled up on them by people like, why have you given away this fantastic spot on this tower to this gigapixel thing, So they started asking me, oh, can we do a dry run? Have you got other examples of this? And then actually, coming up to the date itself, they wanted to know lots of details about how I'd capture it. Did I have a second camera as backup? How fast can I edit it? Can I have it done by 8 in the morning the next day? All this stuff. So the pressure really, really ramped up. So in the meantime, I went off and thanks to Andy Badders from 360 Tactical VR, who's here today, he sold me the Gigapan and gave me loads of advice as well, and put me in contact with good people. So one of my first shots I did the inside of St. Paul's Cathedral as a full spherical gigapixel panorama, just to really test the kit out. And I was really pleased with it. I absolutely loved the way it came out, and you could see incredible detail. And it went really bananas around the UK and parts of the world. I think I had about 45,000 hits in about a week, because it went up on the BBC website as well. But for all that, what people were really seemed to make more noise about with the picture was floating heads or headless bodies, people with missing feet that were in the crowd in the cathedral. So I'll just show you just as an example. And there was nothing more frustrating than putting together this huge picture, which I was very proud of, and having lots of people say, oh, this is cool, but then having half the people just having more fun spotting different heads. So this is how I wanted it to be used, so people could look at, you know, the mosaic or bits of detail in the ceiling and really appreciate the workmanship. But evidently it's more fun to look for floating heads. Oh, there's a guy with no head or feet. That was a popular one. One of my friends actually posted on the picture himself. He said he didn't realize the church still did beheadings, which I thought was quite good. Yeah, Highlander, yeah, exactly. Right, so, yeah, so I obviously wanted to avoid that this time, and that was one of my key aims. So, on the day of the shoot itself, well, first of all, this is the viewpoint I had. So, as you can see, it's a really excellent view. And this little plaque in front of me, the bit of writing on, it actually says, you know, Gigapan camera and tripod, and that's all it says. So I was actually meant to go there and set up at 8 in the morning, but I had this really panicked phone call the day before from all the BBC News team. I said, oh, where are you? Where's all your kit? The vans are all here, and you're not going to have access anymore. People are unloading, and they're all, you know, filling the place up with wires and generators and huge bits of kit, and they couldn't understand that I could just waltz in there the next day with a rucksack. But it obviously, you know, didn't help my nerves the day before this that I had these people who were telling me I might not be able to get in there. So I had to fight through the crowd a bit, but like Ayrton, I had my credentials ready, and I flashed them around, and you know, they let me through. So the kit used in this, I had a D700 and a 70 to 200 millimeter lens as my primary bit of kit, and that was on the Gigapan itself, as you can see there. As a secondary camera, I had a D300 with the same lens, and I used that handheld to shoot, you know, points of particular interest or detail throughout the day. And that's the camera actually used for the royal couple themselves and the procession. Yeah, it's a different sensor size, so I'll get to that when I talk about post-production, but it made a bit of a difference, but, you know, Photoshop's pretty powerful, so. Okay. Yeah, so the main technical aspects and difficulties I had to deal with on the day. Luckily, I got there really early, so I had a lot of time to do a lot of dry runs. One of the main things you think about with shooting with a Gigapan, it's a simple thing, but whether or not you shoot the whole thing as rows going down or columns going along. I mean, essentially, if I'd shot the St. Paul's Cathedral shot as columns going down, then the chances of me I'd have probably got, you know, one of their bodies that might have matched a set of legs below, rather than all the floating heads. So in that case, it would have been better. But for this shot, because I had such a long line of crowd, I shot it in rows, and I lined it up so that when the panorama got to the main amount of the crowd, a full frame would easily cover the majority of that crowd, and it meant that there were a lot less issues of half bodies in the crowd. So that eliminated part of the difficulty. Next thing, what you can do when you're doing gigapixel panoramas, you can either dynamically focus on each frame, which is great for somewhere like St. Paul's Cathedral, because you can focus on a pillar quite close, and then you can also focus on the windows in the distance. But in this case, because of the noise of the crowd and everything like that, if the camera didn't focus on a part of the picture and you didn't hear it, then you've lost the frame. And that can, more than anything else, is just a pain, because you have to then work out where you've lost that frame, and then try and add a frame in from a different panel you took earlier. And that kind of thing takes ages when you're trying to get it all edited for press the next morning. So I stuck to manual focus and just tried to get the best depth of field I could out of the aperture, which happened to be f16 or something like that. But it meant that I didn't have to worry about dynamically focusing. And the D700 is pretty good at low light, so I think it was about an ISO of 800. I need to say as well, it was an overcast day, which couldn't have been any better. So throughout the day, for all the panoramas I shot, there were very small adjustments I needed to make to blend bits from different images. I thought the tower was going to shake quite a bit because people stomping up and down it from the news teams and so on. It was only scaffolding with MDF wood on the outside. But as it happened, as soon as any action happened, everyone froze with their video cameras and it was perfectly still, so that wasn't an issue. Okay, these are my notes from the day. I just kind of tapped into my iPhone just so I could keep a log of what I was doing. And you'll notice that I've even stitched my iPhone notes, which I think is pretty, it shows I'm a bit of a panorama photographer, or nut. Okay, so yes, I took loads of dry runs, and basically what I had to do, and the key with doing this whole shot, was that I realized quite quickly that the Gigapixel Panorama, the Gigapan, so it took about 10 minutes or 15 minutes to do a full sweep from top left corner to bottom right of the panorama. So the chances of me ever timing it with the procession coming down the mall at about 12:15 was just completely ridiculous. It was never going to happen. So what I had to do is essentially pre-shoot the panorama. So I made sure all the trees and everything looked really good. Everything in the background was right. The soldiers were in a good place. So I had a decent kind of basic panorama to work from. And then, luckily, I started noticing that throughout the day, different royals would leave Buckingham Palace, or VIPs would leave Buckingham Palace, and they'd drive up the mall away from me, down through the crowd, and all the crowd would get their cameras out, they'd point them at these people, and they'd start cheering and waving. And so I'd take photos of the crowd doing this and looking in the right direction. And so I just did that all day until the actual wedding. And so I had pictures from the national anthem. Everyone held their flags up and waved them. That's the crowd at the back of the picture. I'll just show you actually one. Yeah, so full screen. So the crowd at the back of the picture, you see all those flags in the background there. And on the right here, all those people are cheering the national anthem. They're not actually cheering the procession. On the left of the picture, all these people here are looking at the Queen leaving to go to Westminster Abbey in the morning. So they're not even looking at the procession either. When I knew the time was coming for the procession to come down the mall, I actually I set up the Gigapan on this central point. And when the procession was further down the road, I started the Gigapan going, so that these people here on the right, leaning out with their cameras, are actually photographing the procession. And that was shot with the Gigapan. Here in the middle, this part here, this was all shot on the D300. And these horses were one frame. This central part was another frame, and then at the back here, that was the final frame. So once I'd got that, and they really flew past on the horses, so I really had to make sure I got the shots. I think I fired off about 100 frames while they're coming down the mall. But then, of course, let me just, so the point of this talk, how do you capture a moment in 189 photos? Well, essentially, you have to cheat. You can't really. I mean, unless you've got some kind of medium format camera that can capture it all. I mean, I couldn't do it otherwise. So then, of course, I'm thinking, right, I've got to get back and get this all edited. But the sight I see in front of me is this army marching towards me. And I wasn't allowed off the roundabout, and people weren't allowed onto it. So I just had to watch. So I took a few pictures while I was there, and this crowd comes closer, and then this police cordon at the front releases, and everyone runs around. And I just thought, how on earth am I going to get out of here? And that's how dense it was. And everyone wants to see the kiss on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. And I wish I could have got a panorama of that. But unfortunately, my tower was obscured completely by the memorial behind me. So I did actually try and take another Gigapixel panorama of this crowd, but they were moving way too much, so I gave up trying to stitch it. And look at the fun of, he's loving it. It was such a great atmosphere there, so it was fun. At this point, I felt like I could relax and enjoy it a bit. Okay, so then in the post-production, yeah, I knew it was going to be quite a late night, but essentially, I actually, thanks to Badders for kind of getting me in contact with the color guys, but I used Autopano Giga to stitch this whole thing, because I used that for the St. Paul's. I found it's the only thing that really worked really well. And it makes such a big difference to my work on the Gigapixel panoramas using it. So I used that to stitch the main panorama, and what I did is I took photos from different panoramas from different times in the day, as I said, so I've got people always looking in the right direction, and I just fitted those in like a jigsaw to make one panorama with Autopano Giga. And when that was exported, I then put it as a big Photoshop file, PSB, and then dropped in the single frame shot from the D300, which, because it was on a crop sensor, yeah, needed a bit of stretching or a bit of moving, but it wasn't too difficult to do. And then just slight kind of exposure and color balance differences from the light changing a little bit. But as I say, I was very lucky because it's such an overcast day. Yeah, so as I said, I added crowds from different shots. And then I had to go through with a fine-tooth comb, because you're always going to get mistakes in these panoramas, no matter how good the software is. But I had policemen with 3 legs and double-headed people and all kinds of little odd things I had to sort out. So I had to just get the original frames, bring them into Photoshop, mask the little bit I wanted, and kind of, it took a long time. I had to get it all done by 8 in the morning, which I did, and I sent it to the BBC, and then I'm waiting, I'm just tapping my fingers. And it gets to about 9 a.m. and it's still not up on the website. So I give them a call and I say, guys, is everything all right? And it turned out that the guy who's meant to come in to work to upload it didn't come in. He must have gone to a royal wedding street party and just didn't turn up for work. So I was sat there, I'd been up all night, trying to get this thing done. And the guy turns up for work at 2 in the afternoon. So how frustrating is that? And eventually they put it up, and it really went bananas. And it was actually on the front page of the BBC website for 2 days. I've got a little picture of it somewhere. I made a little screen capture of the. Am I off the? Here we go. Yeah, so I was, as you can see there, procession, find your face in the crowd. This is on the homepage of the BBC website, which is definitely my biggest claim to fame at the moment. And, I was on there for 2 days and only knocked off by the relatively minor news story of Osama bin Laden being killed. So that's no bad one there, to be knocked off by such a big story as that. Yeah, so that is that. So any questions? Oh, actually, thank you. And sorry, just before the first question, I can't believe I nearly forgot to mention, but it's been a real privilege. Carlos and the team have chosen this picture to be printed 22 meters outside in the main square, and it's just been put up now. So check it out a bit later on. Yeah.
Hi, so I'm Jürgen from New York, and I have a question, of course. Congratulations first for the project.
Thanks.
It's awesome publicity. What was exactly your choice to use a Gigapan for this project? Because it seems like you had so many creative choices to make throughout the shooting process that using a robot for this process makes virtually, to me at least, no sense at this point, because you need to move that section and you need to go over there and then you need to quickly pan back. And I have a feeling that a manual head would have had, for me at least, worked better in this context. So what was your choice to use a Gigapan?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there must have been loads of ways of doing it, but for me, the Gigapan itself, it's very easy to stitch with, and I've tried Gigapans in the past, shooting it by hand, And I've come against, they have worked for me, but I've come against problems with stitching the sky, or certain things haven't stitched perfectly. With the Gigapan, when you output the images, you've got a set number of rows and columns. So if you can match up all the photos you've taken in a day, like a jigsaw, into those number of rows and columns, it stitches really easily and really quickly. And there's a plugin actually with AutoPano Giga for Gigapan, so you can just tell it the kind of settings you've put into the Gigapan. So it's a very automatic system. It takes out a lot of the potential human error if I was to do it with a manual head.
So you're basically relying on the actual data output from the Gigapan robot to locate them.
Only data in that it's just the number of rows and number of columns. Simple as that, yeah.
Thank you.
No?
Well, thank you. Well, please go to the microphone.
Hello, Stuart. One question for the stitching, does it require a very powerful computer?
Yeah, I had to kind of pimp my computer a bit. I found out with the St. Paul's Cathedral shot, it just couldn't cope with it at all. So I had to actually have an external RAID drive to help with it seems to need a lot of space on the hard drive to generate big PSBs. So I used the RAID drive to take all that, to help out. And then also I had to double my RAM. So but I'm doing it all with about 16 gig of RAM, so it's nothing too stupid, and an external RAID drive. But otherwise than that, it's just a 27-inch iMac quad-core. Yeah.
Okay. It was formerly just a personal project, or did you contact the press to sell this project? Did you sell it? Or
yeah, this was a commission from the BBC, and the rights for the whole thing were really tightly slowed down. So I wasn't allowed to. I'm allowed to have it printed in certain situations, but I can't have it on my own website directly. It can only be on the BBC website. Yeah.
Just for my concern, you must be a really famous photographer, because it should be hard to get all the authorization and to have such visibility in one shot. I mean,
yeah,
it's
well,
not.
I think you just it's about who you know in the right places, I suppose. And I just am lucky enough to know some of the guys from the BBC. Yeah.
Okay. Merci beaucoup.
I hope I didn't miss any word of what you said. However, I still don't know how you actually cheated. What I would do, I saw you made 7 or 8 panoramas.
Yeah.
And I would place them all in Photoshop and then cheat. However, Photoshop has some limitations.
Yes.
And how did you do that? What program did you use?
Well, basically, I didn't make 7 panoramas. I shot them, so I had the images to make 7 or 8 panoramas. But I just picked images that I needed from all of the panoramas and put them together into one panorama. So I only stitched one panorama. Yeah.
Thank you, Harry.